It was supposed to be the gentlest chapter of the royal calendar, a ritual that writes itself every December. The Norfolk sky low and pale, the walk to St. Mary Magdalene, the scarves and smiles and small waves that reassure a country it still knows how to do Christmas, and the family photographs that look like they've been kept warm inside a tin of biscuits since the 1950s. But this year the picture is missing two faces the public has learned to scan for even when it wishes it did not, because sources close to the king say the Yorks, Prince Andrew and Sarah, Duchess of York, will not be welcome at Sandringham, and the message is not coded in velvet, it is written in frost, out of sight, out of mind, out of the frame. The decision did not drop out of a clear blue winter sky. It arrived on the back of a grim, renewed headline, an email in which Sarah Ferguson referred to Jeffrey Epstein as a supreme friend, a groveling note that her camp insists was written under threat and fear but that nevertheless reads like a torch tossed onto dry tinder. Charities stepped back, patrons blinked, and the old argument about reputational gravity roared to life. How many times can one house carry the same burden before the roof sags? The king, who has tried to balance mercy with maintenance, appears to have decided that the optics of any York presence at the most photographed family moment of the year are impossible to launder. Even a private lunch behind closed doors risks the charge of hypocrisy if the public walk suggests forgiveness his government of the crown has not actually granted. Jenny Bond, who has watched these corridors for decades, put it with the kind of clarity only earned the hard way. Inconceivable, she said, that Andrew and Sarah could appear in public at Sandringham. If they slipped in privately, the cameras would still smell it, and the king would pay twice, first for indulgence, then for secrecy. So the guidance becomes a boundary, and the boundary becomes policy, and policy has consequences that will ripple far beyond one cold morning's procession to church. Strip the sentiment from the situation and look at the ledger the way William does, because in this particular drama the heir's fingerprints are everywhere without his voice saying a word. He has been arguing for years that the monarchy must become smaller, cleaner, sharper, that it should stop trying to be everything to everyone and instead become reliably excellent at the handful of things that justify its survival in a skeptical century, and that means ruthlessly managing risk. To him the York portfolio is not an eccentricity to be tolerated but a systemic vulnerability, one that loops the institution back, again and again, to the same reputational minefield. Epstein, payoffs, emails, toe-curling interviews, tone-deaf optics, best divorced couple anecdotes that land badly in a cost-of-living crisis. When he walks to church with his family he wants the photograph to sell continuity and competence. When Andrew or Sarah appear anywhere near that frame, the picture sells memory and mess. The king understands this at a bone-deep level, but he is also a brother and, as Jenny Bond notes, a sensitive man who dislikes public cruelty, and yet even tenderness has to obey arithmetic. The Yorks are now a net-loss proposition on any public stage where the Crown's social license is being quietly renewed one handshake at a time. What makes this Christmas call different is its finality of tone. Last year the palace could plausibly argue that absence was a prudential choice. This year absence looks like doctrine. The phrase circulating arm's length has the smell of boardroom policy rather than family preference. It means no walk to church, no casual window cameos, no they're here but keeping out of sight whispers that rupture the illusion. It also means a test for the Yorks' own discipline. Will they do what their supporters claim they want, disappear into a private family Christmas with daughters and grandchildren and let the institution breathe without their gravitational pull, or will there be another well-meaning misstep, a funeral entrance that becomes a headline, a photograph of an ignored, light-hearted remark that detonates into proof of frost between uncle and heir? These tiny optics matter because they accrue. Each one spends down a little more of the monarchy's store of goodwill at precisely the moment the Crown is trying to prove it learned from the 1990s that indulgence fuels disaster. There is also the matter of consequence, a drum the public is beating and that commentators like Bond are now echoing openly. If exclusion from Sandringham is a boundary, what is the gesture that reads as a sanction? The suggestions on the table are not symbolic trinkets, they are live wires. The Order of the Garter, the most senior chivalric honor in the country, and Andrew's status as Councillor of State, the legal backstop that allows a tiny circle to act in the sovereign's stead. He has already been stripped of military affiliations and public patronages. Further removals would not be an orgy of punishment so much as a continuation of the same logic that produced this Christmas decision: sever public functions from people whose presence risks contaminating the very idea of service. To the York loyalist this looks harsh, even vindictive. To the institutionalist it looks overdue. Sarah Ferguson's defenders put forward the same plea they have offered for years: that she is contrite, that she is more sinned against than sinning, that her catastrophes are those of a woman whose appetite outpaced her judgment, that the infamous email was typed with fear at her back. All of which may be true and still irrelevant to the one question that governs the King's December. Will the public understand, at a glance, that rules are rules? The royal family survives not by being perfect but by being predictable in its adherence to a few simple, hard things. You do not trade in the family's capital to cover the debts of its most combustible members. You do not smuggle controversy into the most public room of the year. Christmas is the shop window. The window cannot contain smoke. Look closer and you can see how this decision ripples through the family map. Sandringham is not simply a set, it is a gathering point, a peacemaker, an engine that recharges the idea of togetherness in a clan that spends 11 months running at different speeds in different directions. Remove 2 habitual presences and the seating plan, literal and emotional, shifts. For Beatrice and Eugenie, loyal daughters navigating the impossible trigonometry of loving parents the public has tired of, it means a Christmas in a parallel lane, a kinder privacy perhaps, but also a reminder that their branch is now permanently off the central trunk. For the Waleses it means relief, the removal of an ambient moral hum that used to haunt otherwise warm images. For the King, it means another test of his ability to separate personal sorrow from institutional necessity. He can feel both, he must choose one. If you are hunting for clues, watch the choreography of the coming weeks. Will the palace quietly brief that the Yorks plan to host their own gathering with grandchildren, a framing that emphasizes dignity and draws a circle around the next generation rather than around grievance? Will there be a nudge about private time and respecting the King's wish for a focused family moment, phrases that are popcorn words to the tabloids and yet act like sandbags around the day itself? Will the Mail and the broadsheets carry the same script: no room for distraction, compassion in private, discipline in public? These are not trivial communications choices, they are the brakes on a narrative that could otherwise skid into the ditch of heartless monarch banishes brother at Christmas. The Crown cannot afford that story, nor can it afford the alternative of two-tier forgiveness, one for the gilded, another for the governed. There is also the unglamorous, necessary matter of precedent. If the King allows the Sandringham exclusion to stand this year, he has set a bar he cannot lower casually next year without inviting suspicion that pressure, pleading, or fatigue eroded his resolve. That is why Bond's framing matters. She spoke of permanence, of endings, of the arm's-length approach becoming the long-term template. If the Yorks skipped last Christmas because the Andrew spy story was fresh and this Christmas because the Ferguson email is raw, then what, exactly, would change by next Christmas? The claims do not expire. The photographs do not evaporate. The public's memory does not reboot every Advent. Permanence is not cruelty, it is clarity. Behind all this is a fact William has never said into a microphone but communicates with every refusal to be photographed in compromising proximity: the next monarchy will be built in the image of scarcity, not abundance. Fewer working royals. Fewer events. Fewer chances to go wrong. The ambition is not to become invisible, it is to become unimpeachably useful when visible and entirely silent when not. In that world the Yorks are not merely awkward, they are existentially off-script. It is not that there is no road back for private people, it is that there is no road back to the balcony for public problems. If you want to understand why this Christmas decision matters, that is the line it draws in the frost. There is a quiet, kinder subtext here that should not be lost. The King's choice spares his grandchildren the annual funhouse of whispers and side eyes on a day that should belong to them as much as to the nation. It spares parishioners at a tiny Norfolk church the circus that would follow a single telephoto lens landing on a single infamous profile. It spares the cameras the moral hazard of turning a service into a referendum. It even spares Andrew and Sarah a humiliation they would tell themselves they could bear but that would, inevitably, become another clip in the endless highlight reel that keeps them from disappearing into private dignity. Sometimes the best mercy a leader can offer is the refusal to make a spectacle of someone who cannot stop making spectacles of themselves. Of course, there will be voices calling for more. They always arrive once a boundary proves popular. Strip the garter, they will shout, remove the Councillor of State roll, close off Royal Lodge, publish every public pound that still flows in their direction, draw the map in ink. The king will hear these arguments and, perhaps, in time, act on some of them. But the Sandringham call already tells you his core instinct: do the large, symbolic, legible thing that cleans the picture first. It is a tactic the late Queen used with almost mischievous consistency: tidy the scene and let people guess at the paperwork later. For a public that no longer has time to parse nuance, a crisp image is a mercy. So what happens next? The Yorks will, in all likelihood, stage a happy, private Christmas. Photos will leak of grandchildren playing with boxes larger than the presents that came in them. A friend will whisper that Sarah is devastated but resilient, that Andrew is focused on family, that both accept the king's decision while hoping time will heal. There may be another charity that parts ways and another that stands by her, a small drama that plays out beneath the bigger one. The rest of the family will walk the familiar path from house to church, coats tight against the wind, the smiles genuine and a little relieved. The pictures will look, to most eyes, better, cleaner, lighter, less freighted with subtext. And a country that has learned, the hard way, that institutions survive by adhering to rules even when those rules bite, will quietly approve. Call it a reset if you like, or, more accurately, a refusal to relapse. One branch of a complicated family has been asked to celebrate elsewhere so the trunk can hold its shape. Out of sight, out of mind is a phrase that can sound cruel when it's aimed at people. It sounds like governance when it's aimed at risk. The king has made his choice. The heir has the policy he wanted. The public will get its Christmas picture without the shadow that always pulled the eye. And somewhere in Norfolk, as the choir finishes the last carol and the children tumble toward the scent of roast potatoes, the crown will have earned what it always needs most and finds hardest to keep: a little uncomplicated goodwill.